my name is Joseph Carlson, and this is episode 60 of The Grief of Politics. I had a technical problem. Avin and I already recorded an episode, but there was an audio problem, and my audio and his audio were not good. So we talked about how Trump was getting pushback from different places in the government and stuff like that. And it was a good episode. Avin and I think, had some great arguments how it's probably not going that well for Trump. But I think what happened was I wanted to share this with you because this is a big story. On Tuesday of this week, I'm recording this on, what is today? Thursday. It's the 18th of December, a couple days before this episode posts. I believe Tuesday. Sorry, I'm just going to scan through this episode because I got the date wrong. This posted on December 16th, so Tuesday. There was an article with... it was in Vanity Fair, and it was written by Chris Whipple, who apparently has written some biographies before of different chiefs of staff. And this time he focused on Susie Wiles, who is the woman in the middle of the photo. If you're watching this on YouTube, if you're listening to this, she's the chief of staff. It's hard to find pictures of her because she does kind of stay off to the side. She mentions that in the interview. There's some good pictures of her here, so it was good to actually see her, or really what she looked like. I'd only seen her side photos and things. But I want to talk about something. I literally read this article through, I've heard some reporting on it. I'm a political junkie, obviously. A lot of different people were giving their takes on this article and how, damaging it was for the Trump White House, because Susie Wiles, usually chiefs of staff are usually buttoned up. They usually don't say a lot. And it seemed that Susie Wiles was kind of just saying a lot of things that you wouldn't want your chief of staff to say. She basically, to be very broad, she basically said that Trump was lying about a lot of the policies they put forward, and a lot of people reported on that. But I read this, and just something, I literally sat with the article for a full day, and then obviously want to record this. But there's just something that struck me that was so... it's something that very few people are talking about. I'm not saying, nobody's talking about this, but I think it really needs to be focused on more. And I'm going to give you some examples from the article. I will read them if you're listening to the audio of this. If you like the show in any way, shape, or form, please like and subscribe. We're on YouTube. We hit the 20th of every month. And that may change in the new year. Avin and I are talking about some things. But subscribe. This is an audio form as well. It hits 7 in the morning. On audio platforms, on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, things like that. Please support the show in any way you can. Share it with your friends, family. If you like usually two people talking about politics, usually it's myself and my co-host, Avin Carroll. But there's a bunch of episodes you can go back and look to. We've been doing this for a long time. We've done an episode a month. We're on episode 60 right now, so that shows you how many we've done. But again, back to this Vanity Fair story. I just think that there's something that just stuck in my head reading this story that I don't think a lot of people have talked about, and I think it needs to be talked about. And it hit a chord for me, and I want to explain why. So in this article, Susie Wiles talks about how her father, I'm going to see if I can find the exact quote here. I tried to highlight these, but sometimes the highlights just disappear, so that's not good for content when stuff just disappears. Here we go. Basically, her father was an alcoholic, is what she talks about. And she said because of that, she likened President Trump's personality to that of an alcoholic, that it takes big swings. And that because her father was an alcoholic, that she was used to managing that type of personality, because even though Trump doesn't drink, he has wide swings in his personality, and she likened it to her father. She's like, well, my father had a big personality, and I was able to handle that. I'll be able to handle Trump. And one thing I still don't think is talked about enough, and luckily, my father had his problems with alcohol, but luckily he got sober when I was young. But I had friends, obviously, that their, parents had problems with. And this is all, I'm not a psychologist or a therapist. But it does seem like in some of these situations, that sometimes you go along to get along. The idea that you don't want to make waves. You know, this person that has this personality that swings. You're like, well, they're in the middle of a swing. I don't want to be part of the swing, so I'm just going to hang back and I'm going to pick my battles. I'm going to tell them to, stop parking their car in the wrong part of the driveway when they come home from a bender. Anyway, I don't want to get sidetracked. But what I'm saying is it does, like right here, what I'm showing you in the article, if you're watching this on YouTube, they have a photo of Susie Wiles, and they have a big thing that says the enforcer. And this is the architect of President Donald Trump's 2024 election victory, which is true. She helped win the election. She helped run his campaign. Now his White House chief of staff is the daughter of the famous sportscaster Pat Summerall. As Wiles explains, her father was an alcoholic, so she knows how to deal with difficult men with big personalities. She said, quote, "I make a specialty of it," she says with a laugh, as the crisis of Trump's 2.0 pile up. From Signalgate to revenge and retribution to the Epstein files to alleged war crimes on the high seas, Wiles has worked at the center of the storm, the Trump whisperer who sees it all. "I'm entering my 9th year altogether, my 5th year day to day," she says, working with Trump, "so it's hard to surprise me," end quote. So here's the deal. They label her as an enforcer, all right? And you think, all right, you're going to butt heads. And I want to go to the end of the article. Again, I don't know how to I'm old, I guess, and I don't know how to do this, but apparently there's a quote. There's a bunch of good pictures in here. But I remember there's a quote towards the end of this where, there's a part 2 to this. There was a quote in this. I can't find it again. I feel bad that there was a chief of staff. Here's another picture. If you're watching this on YouTube of Mark Rubio, there's like a couple other people I'm not familiar with. Apparently they're big players. There's J.D. Vance, Susie Wiles. But here's the deal. There was a quote in here by a former chief of staff. They have actually several quotes by other chiefs of staff. And they talk about, like, you're the one that has to go in the room and go, sir, Mr. President, you don't want to go down this road. And you get in a fight. You verbally fight them to say, we're not doing this. This is illegal, or this is against our principles as Republicans, Democrats, whatever. We're not doing this. It's too far. There's tons of stories throughout history of people saying, like in the cabinet of the president, of them saying, if you do this, I will resign. And then they back up because they obviously trust the chief of staff to make the right choice and say, all right, I'm going to back off. I'm not going to do this. It's insane to me that in the beginning of this article, I'm going to have to go back to part 1. But in the beginning of this article, she says to Mr. Whipple, the guy who did this reporting, she says, we haven't ever had any big fights. They've been, we haven't really had any big fights. They've all been small things. One of the first things they mention in part 1 of this article, and I want to read it to you because to me this just hit. I was like, oh. They start doing it day by day. This was over 11 months, and so they have all these micro interviews with these people. I'm just going to read this whole section. This is T-minus 9 days, January 11th. So he has 9 days till Trump's going to be sworn in. Well, this is more about like her background. Sorry. Right here. So this is day 1. Trump has just been sworn in as January 20th, 2025. On Trump's first day in office, the president signed a flurry of executive orders, 26 in all, withdrawing the U.S. from the World Health Organization and the Paris Climate Agreement, rescinding birthright citizenship, sending troops to the southern border, freezing foreign aid, and stopping federal hiring. Then Trump issued pardons to almost everyone convicted in the bloody January 6th, 2021 assault on the Capitol, in which 9 people ultimately died and 150 were injured. Even rioters who'd beaten the cops within an inch of their lives were set free. 14 people convicted of seditious conspiracy had their sentences commuted. But here's the deal. I don't know. Last time I looked at this, it was spread out a little bit differently. And Mr. Whipple, the reporter, asked her, did she ever ask the president, wait a minute, do you really want to pardon all 1,500 January 6 convicts? Or should we be more selective? And she said, quote, I did exactly that, Wiles replied. I said, I'm on board with the people that were happenstancers or didn't do anything violent. And we certainly know that everyone did know what everybody did because the FBI had done such an incredible job. And then he's got a little parentheses. Trump has said the FBI investigators were corrupt and part of a deep state. And that was the end of the parentheses. But Trump argued that even the violent offenders had been unfairly treated, Wiles explained. In every case of the ones he was looking at, in every case, they had already served more time than the sentence guidelines would have suggested. So given that, I sort of got on board. Quote, according to and there's another parentheses, according to the court records, many of the January 6 rioters pardoned by Trump had received sentences that were lighter than the guidelines. There have been a couple of times when I've been outvoted. And if there's a tie, he wins. This is like the first big thing. You come in the first day. You have to be, the person at the gates holding on to the people trying to break in. And this is the president. You have to tell him these are bad ideas. And she says, well, I don't agree with this. We can't pardon the violent offenders of January 6th. And he says, I just think they were treated unfairly. And she looked it over, which, to be honest, I don't really think she looked it over that clearly or, thoroughly. And then she says, you know what? You're right, sir. Let's just let it go. And that goes to the get along to go along. Like this idea that you don't want to fight. She's used to dealing with big personalities. She doesn't want to fight. I don't want to make this a thing. I just want to go back in my office. And deal with the memos I got to deal with. I'm going to write a press statement. Carolyn Levitt, the press secretary, is her direct employee. So, reports to her. So she has to, the president got fired. It's probably the president. But anyway, Carolyn Levitt reports to her. Here's the deal. She wants to do that. There is a quote later in the piece where Rahm Emanuel, who was, I don't know if I think he was the chief of staff he was the chief of staff for Obama. He said, a reporter asked him, do you like the job? And he basically pointed to both sides of his office and said, I love everything out that door and I like everything out there. And he pointed outside to the ferns and stuff. He said, everything in here sucks. And they asked her the same question. Is it, this is what Rahm Emanuel said. Whipple says, do you feel this way? And she says, it's great. I'm great. It's great. Now, she said a lot of damning stuff in this interview. And I think she could say, you're right. He was right. This really blows, But she chose not to do that. She just says, I guess, yeah, it's not that bad, I suppose. You go home at night, you try to sleep, you try to do the best you can. But, there's no... She says, well, we have small fights. It's this seems like a pretty big deal. No matter what you think about January 6th, he's let them all go. And she's like, all right. I looked at it. I guess you're wrong. It's, again, I'm not a psychologist or anything, but it does seem to be this thing, she probably did manage her father and say, oh, okay, he's in a good mood. I have to do this. He's in a bad mood. I have to do this. And that's what she's doing with Trump. She's like, well, he's in a bad mood. He's really worked up about these January 6 people, so I just have to let it go and just let him pardon all this stuff. And here's another thing. I want to see if I can find it. It's probably in part 2. But in part 2, you're just seeing my newsfeed, by the way. They start mentioning the... and her quote, her famous quote here, which I love, is she says, so no, Wiles said Trump had been clear-eyed about what he wanted, having not been there for 4 years and having had time to think about it, and therefore she can pick her battles. So no, I'm not an enabler. I'm also not a bitch. I try to be thoughtful about what I even engage in. So she's picking her battles. He's really worked up about this whole thing. I'm just going to let it go. I guess time will tell whether I'm effective on it. Well, let me tell you something, Susie Wiles. You helped win his campaign, and that's great. We can't take that away from you. No matter what I think about Trump, he can't say we always try to say Trump was a loser and all this stuff, but he won the presidency twice, so he's a winner. He won. But you just opening the door for his worst impulses and just letting things go, it's pretty crazy. I think this criticism, the first Trump administration, there's a lot of criticism about it, obviously, but I think there was like people in the room. There was kind of like that old conservative guard that were like, we're not doing that. I mean, there's been so many reports. He wanted to allegedly shoot protesters during the Black Lives Matters protest. Said, can we just shoot them in the knees? And I think it was John Kelly, I think, that said, no, we're not doing that. Well, now he's kind of just like, there's no one with that kind of like scruple. So they're just like, well, we could do whatever we want. I mean, they talk about the boat bombings in Venezuela. Sorry, I'm trying to see. Again, I tried to like quote this stuff, but there's good photos in this. Here we go. During my visit with Wiles in the White House in November, Trump's revenge tour against his domestic enemies was in full swing. So was his lethal campaign against Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro, who Trump was convinced headed a powerful drug cartel. Over lunch, Wiles told me about Trump's Venezuela strategy. He wants to keep on blowing boats up until Maduro cries uncle, and people way smarter than me on that say that he will. Wiles' statement appears to contradict the administration's official stance that blowing up boats is about drug interdiction, not regime change. I'd already pressed Wiles on Trump's practice of blowing boats out of the water. The casualties almost certainly include unsuspecting fishermen. In 2016, Trump had famously mused that he could shoot someone on Fifth Avenue and not lose any supporters. Now he seems to be testing a deal on a global stage. When a critic on X denounced these killings as war crimes, Vance posted, "I don't give a shit what you call it." It goes on. Here's another big thing. Should we really be blowing these boats out of the water, sir? I'm your chief of staff. We should not be doing this. And he's like, well, we're going to keep blowing them up until Maduro rolls over. And she says, okay. And just goes back to her office to drink sparkling water and talk about her battle plan with Carolyn Levitt about how they're going to attack the press. It's just so strange to me that like no one's talking about this. I don't know. I haven't read the history or the biographies of every single chief of staff about what they went through and things like that and like how much power they wielded. But this to me, just Susie Wiles' tenure so far in this seems to be so just a game of chicken where she constantly just is the one losing the game of chicken, where whatever kind of like, whatever she feels about something, she just drives her feelings car into a ditch. In fact, I think this shows that she really, like, there's really no, like, moral, like, no matter what I want to say for Bush and all them and how I feel about the Iraq and Afghanistan war and all the previous presidents, like Kissinger, obviously, great documentary on PBS about him, a two-parter. I watched the first part and had to stop for a bit because it's really troubling stuff. But this idea of how much power chief of staff wields, I think anyway, I'm trying to say is like, I don't know about their moral compass or anything like that, but it seems like she just does not have one. She's like, well, whatever you want, go ahead. Like it seems like if her kid called and said, hey mom, I just murdered someone, she's like, well, I guess, you get mad at somebody, I guess it kind of makes sense. I'm seeing this and I just don't understand like where her, like, again, like reading about Kissinger and even Rumsfeld and all these people in the room and technically Cheney, they had an ideology that led them in a certain direction. We're doing this. And this thing, I think Susie Wiles thinks is like, well, I got a corner office, so I guess I'll just let you do whatever. And I keep hearing these things behind the scenes that she's like, well, I'm not going to let certain people bother the president, like Laura Loomer, who is like a massive, just like thorn in the side of like, well, let's be honest, she's a thorn in the side of YouTube. If I have to watch another video where Laura Loomer like makes fun of a minority and then, I whatever. The thing is, I've heard all this reporting of like Susie Wiles like, oh, We got to make sure the president's working. I don't want Laura Loomer in here. Well, Laura Loomer just keeps coming back to parties, having people fired. It's like, so what are you doing? Like, you keep saying you're keeping the president on track. Like, there's video of him falling asleep in meetings. He had to fire the people that were working on the ballroom because it wasn't coming along to plan. And like, so that's what he's doing. So they're just funneling him in a direction to keep him busy so they could do whatever they want. And Susie Wiles is like cashing a check. Like, I don't know what she's doing. Like, you know, these 8 wars that Trump has supposedly solved, they're gone. It's gone. They're gone. Like, they're still going on. Ceasefires are being broken. People are still dying. People are starving. Even during this, she talks about Elon Musk and PEPFAR that, helped bring down cases of AIDS throughout the world, mostly Africa, but throughout the world, and also USAID. And she's like, gee, I didn't know this was going to be such a big deal. But she didn't go back to the president and say, it's been 3 months. We have this much data to prove that these people have died. We haven't got these to factories. It's hurting farmers because, as I've read and it's been reported on, farmers sell things to U.S. They sell stuff to the government so we can ship it places. And when you get rid of that, now farmers are in a worse spot. And with the tariffs, it's even worse. So my thing is like, yeah, she's like, okay, well, yeah, we shouldn't have trashed USAID. And the reporter's like, yeah, it was really bad. And she's like, yeah, but what are you going to do? Her whole job is basically to shrug and say, what are you going to do? And she just doesn't want to get in a fight because she thinks she's managing. I'm putting air quotes for the YouTube people, but you know, just imagine me with air quotes right now. She's managing Trump's personality, and it's like, it's just such a like. It's again, I was very lucky. My father went into recovery when I was young, and like I don't think there. I mean, there was other stuff with my dad's personality that we would, you know, butt heads on when I got older. I mean, that's a completely different podcast. It doesn't really have to do with politics. But, like, I do see this, and I know people that have, like, been in this situation of, like, well, I don't want to make waves. I don't want to make waves. And it just seems like Susie Wiles' whole thing right now is, well, I don't want to make waves. I just got to write it out. I'm sure on a calendar or something in, like, I don't know, she probably uses Google Calendar. Like, I'm a Mac guy. But anyway, she probably somewhere has a date for when she can either quit or when the last day in office. Like, Trump's done. It's, 2028. He's out. Boom. I'm out January 21st. Like, it's not a thing of, oh, here's my legacy. None of that. So, I mean, I'm sorry, my iPad's going off. That's actually Avon calling. But anyway, I just want to get that out of the way. Avon and I will talk to you guys in the new year. And I'll see you guys next month.